find your lack of faith disturbing.
Time travel is one of the biggest mysteries of the universe. Many people may think that time travel is impossible or simply that the technology hasn't been created yet. But what if the universe has left us many clues that time travel actually exists? What if a famous man was brought back to life or your memories altered by a person making small changes to the timeline? Today, on Mysteries of the Universe, we will be taking a trip through history to determine if history has been changed by time travelers, and if so, how do these changes affect our world today? My name is Devin Worlds, and this is the Mandela Effect. Nelson Mandela was born July 18th of 1918. He was a South African revolutionary, politician, and philanthropist. But what if Nelson Mandela never was a politician? According to Wikipedia, Nelson Mandela served as president of South Africa from 1994 to 1999. And like Barack Obama was the United States' first black president, Nelson Mandela was also South Africa's first black head of state. He later died on December 5th of 2013. The funny thing about this part of history seems that nobody really remembers it. Most people believe that Nelson Mandela died in the early 90s while he was in jail. This is something I also believed all the way until the movie Invictus was released in 2009, which starred Morgan Freeman as Nelson Mandela. I have no current memory of Nelson Mandela ever being president of South Africa, but maybe it's because I simply was never into international politics or world history. But many people say they remember the day of his funeral and riots taking place afterwards. This belief is what spawned the conspiracy theory known as the Mandela Effect. But not everybody believes this theory, and with great reason. After all, time travel and switching between universes does sound crazy if you've never done it.
So we've got invisibility. I think one of the big ones, the big questions, time travel. Are we ever going to be able to jump past the problems of space-time to be able to move back and, go back to the age of the dinosaurs or go forward?
Well, my colleague Stephen Hawking was famous for saying that time travel is not possible.
Right.
Because, well, where are the tourists from the future? They're not taking my picture, so time travel is impossible.
Maybe they are.
But maybe they're invisible. Invisibility is not
putting it
out
all
of the question.
together.
Plus, maybe we're not interesting to them. If you go down a country road and see an anthill, do you go down to the ants and say, I bring you trinkets, I bring you beads, I give you nuclear energy?
No, you sit there with a magnifying glass and
burn a few, or step on a few of them, right? So what makes us think that we are so cool that an intelligent species in outer space or our descendants are going to come and visit us?
Yeah.
However, if somebody knocks on your door one day and claims to be your great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter, don't slam the door. Because it's possible that centuries from now, our descendants will be able to manipulate the power of a black hole, a star, go backwards in time, and meet their illustrious ancestor that they've all read about in the history books.
Which would be so great.
The theory of the Mandela Effect was started by a lady known as Fiona Broome. Right away, Fiona Broome's theory became a very controversial topic. Millions of people have since discovered many things that they would consider as proof of the Mandela Effect. But others aren't buying Fiona's theory. Fiona Broome is a paranormal consultant. Many people call her a witch and say that her practices are demonic in nature. And I understand their concerns because the Bible says the dead are unaware of the living and the living is unaware of the dead. And the Bible literally warns against contacting spirits. So if you're contacting spirits, you're contacting demons, fallen angels, and sometimes the devil himself. You're being manipulated. You're being deceived.
The Mandela Effect is a concept associated with Fiona Broome, a researcher and paranormal consultant. In other words, She is connected to the dark underworld and demonic consultations and communication with the dead. Another form of witchcraft or mind manipulation through dark forces. In an article on her website, she discusses ghost hunting in haunted cemeteries. She is in no way a woman of godly influence, but her movement is being treated as such by those of a gullible nature. This so-called Mandela Effect describes situations where a number of people have memories that are different to available evidence. Broom says the name comes from several different people having memories of Nelson Mandela dying in the 1980s rather than in 2013. Now, this paranormal concept has taken wings, and you now have many people buying into the whole idea, which proves how easily the human mind can be infiltrated and manipulated. Those who go headstrong into these winds of doctrine usually prepare plausible-sounding reasons why those who choose not to be engulfed are the ones who are easily manipulated, when they themselves show all of the attributes of a person that has allowed witches and warlocks to get into their heads. This is a common trick used by those whose minds have been taken over to help indoctrinate others with this mind-cluttering poison. If they can convince you that these concepts and winds of doctrine deserves your attention, then they have successfully indoctrinated you with the same manipulations that have taken control over their minds.
Whatever your belief may be on this topic, it's kind of hard to argue with some of the proposed Mandela effects. But before we dive into some pretty good and well-known Mandela effects, like the Berenstain Bears, the Oscar Mayer Wiener song, and even Star Wars, let's take a look at some pretty compelling evidence of the possibility that time travel may be indeed a real thing. Time travel is another conspiracy that, as of now, only the government may have the answer to. Is it real or is it fake? Nobody seems to know, but there is a lot of evidence online that may indeed solve this age-old mystery. One of the most popular photos online is this of a man known as the time-traveling hipster. This picture has undergone many tests to see if it's real or not, and indeed, this picture is very real. This picture was taken in the early 1940s, and they even have another picture from a different angle where you can see the back of this man's head. Notice how the man is wearing modern clothing with sunglasses. Sunglasses were not fashionable in the 1940s. It was very uncommon to see people with sunglasses like these unless people needed them for work. But if that doesn't convince you, just take a look at this man's camera. It appears he is holding a pocket-sized digital camera. Is this man indeed a time traveler from the future?
This question comes from Fraser Kane of the website Universe Today, and it's a question I've also wondered many times. Doesn't the fact that there are no time travelers now prove that time travel will never be invented in the future?
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and I've always thought about that, because I said to myself, in fact, if you watch the CBS sitcom The Big Bang Theory, in the roommate contract of, I know you got to be totally in the show for this, but in the roommate contract that stipulated that if I'm getting the details of it wrong, the sense of it is right.
They'll still be very excited.
If any one of them invents a time machine in the future, they have to go back to that moment that they're reading that phrase in the roommate contract to show up in the room. And so they're going through the contract, and then they pause for a moment. No, okay, we have, you're not the one who invents the time machine in the future.
That's the ultimate, let's agree to meet back here 10 years from now, but it's at the same time. That's awesome.
Exactly. And so I think that's a pretty good argument. And I don't have a rebuttal to that.
But what if people are hiding it? What if people have come back but are not telling people for some reason because they don't want to give something away?
There's a quote, I think it was from Roald Dahl, but others perhaps have said it, that the only secret that can be kept between two people is when one of them is dead. So I'm pretty sure that if a time machine were out there, people would have figured that one out. It's been rumored that the reason why the Titanic sank is because in the future they invented a time machine, and everyone wanted to go back to the Titanic to see the iceberg when it hits, and then it overloaded the Titanic and it sank. Right.
Oh, well, now I'm convinced.
So there's the evidence. You're looking for evidence?
There we go.
That's hardcore evidence. So that's a pretty good one.
Yeah.
And it might be that your time travel machine can only take you into the future, and then you don't have these paradoxes of killing your grandmother and then you're never born to go back to
the future stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
While scientists like Neil deGrasse don't believe that there is any proof of time travel, others aren't so convinced that these popular mainstream media scientists are the most trustworthy individuals. Neil deGrasse also doesn't believe the Earth is flat, while flat earthers argue that there is plenty of evidence for the Earth being flat. Here on Up TV, we did a video giving reasons why you should research flat Earth. Don't be blind by your current belief. At least listen to both sides. You may be convinced to change your opinion. Check out this video if you want to know more about the flat Earth theory. Another thing that makes people feel that Neil deGrasse is untrustworthy is the fact that he doesn't believe in God. Science is his God.
And leads to the next question, because a few people on the lines are asking, do you believe in God?
I'm not convinced. If here's the thing, if every time I talk about God with someone who's a believer, God is all powerful and all knowing and all good, right? The good is a big part of this. Mm-hmm. And then I look at all the ways Earth wants to kill us.
Strangle us.
You know, a tsunami takes out 250,000 people, hurricanes, earthquakes, tornadoes, floods, and I add all of that up. Either the God is not all powerful or is not all good. But it can't really be both, given all the ways the universe wants to kill us. And if Earth is not finished killing you, there's the asteroid that could come in.
Right.
An asteroid rendered 70% of all life forms extinct. Back in the famous one in 65 million years ago that took out the dinosaurs. So there's so many ways to die, not at the hands of someone else who has free will. Mm-hmm. That I don't know what is the nature of the God that you're talking about.
I gotta try to use your logic back at you. Uh-huh. But don't we define what is good and what is bad? So we see a tsunami wipe out a whole bunch of people, and we're as human beings going, wow, that's bad, because we define what bad is. Maybe in God's brain, eyes, whatever the hell, that's not bad.
Well, but except you defined what God is.
Oh boy!
Wow.
Now you did it.
That's
so. Why do you have the power to define who and what God is,
right,
but not have the power to define what good is?
Yeah, my point is we just don't know it all. Not even close.
Oh, sure. So therefore, if you're going to say God actually is good, and 250,000 people dying from an earthquake and a tsunami and other natural disasters, right, and God presumably has control over that, and God is good, then we have to then say God works in mysterious ways, right?
There you go.
That's that. But people only say that when their understanding of God fails them.
When
right?
it's something bad.
No, when they can't understand it, they say, well, God works in mysterious ways. But somehow, in these other ways, you did understand him.
Right.
How are you saying, well, this is the handiwork of God? You're doing God's work. God wants you to do this. Somehow you know God's motives every other way. Mm-hmm. But when 250,000 people get wiped out, God works in mysterious ways. Mm-hmm. Why do you even claim to have access to God's mind in some contexts and not others?
Oh, exactly.
Just admit you have no clue,
right,
and get on with life. That's how I look at it.
There's one unsolved mystery that may prove the existence of time travel: UFOs. UFOs have been linked to extraterrestrials, but what if aliens are more terrestrial than we know? What if UFOs are actually time machines, and the people who are inside are actually humans from the future? This growing theory is not without reason. If UFOs were time machines, think about how many different makes and models you would have access to in the future. If Microsoft built the first functional time machine, soon after many tech giants would follow the trend. Apple would have its own, Sony would have its own, Samsung would have one. This explains why, when people see UFOs, they see many different kinds, normally disc-shaped, some bigger than others, with only white lights, some with cool flashy colors, and some that are so big we call them motherships. While President Donald Trump just recently released the JFK files, it makes us have hope that he will also release the files about UFOs and extraterrestrials. Although some people don't believe there is any proof of time travel, many people point to the Mandela Effect as being one of the greatest proofs of time travel. But let's take a look at these 5 other pieces of evidence of time travel. Number 5. In 1938, this woman was recorded speaking on a mobile phone. Her grandchildren said that she told them that DuPont had a telephone communication section in the factory where she worked, but this doesn't explain why she has a mobile phone. Number 4. Behind the scenes of Charlie Chaplin's The Circus, another woman was caught on tape speaking on a mobile phone. You can clearly see the woman is talking to someone and even stops for a second to speak to whoever is on the other end of the line. Number 3. A ring that appears to look like a modern-day Switch watch was found in an ancient Chinese tomb. You can even see the hands on the watch, which appear to be stuck on 1006. The tomb the ring was found in is 400 years old. Number 2 is of an 1800s astronaut carved into a pillar at Salamanca's Cathedral Church in Spain. Without a doubt, this man is an astronaut. Some say this is evidence of a space-traveling astronaut back from the future, a real Marty McFly. And number 1, the Cape Scott story. This photo was taken in 1917 and shows a man who is clearly out of place, with longer hair and a modern t-shirt. Also notice how the man next to him are staring at him in disbelief. Many of these theories are up for debate, but here's a clip of a man on Coast to Coast AM claiming to have time travel back in time to the Gettysburg's address.
There as a spectral presence in that time and place, but not there entirely physically. And that's what chronovision was achieving, and a later technology called plasma confinement, which they were using to get me to Gettysburg in 1863.
And let's talk about Gettysburg. We've got this incredible photograph that you gave us. It's up there on the coasttocoastam.com website. Explain that and why Gettysburg. Why'd they send you back there?
Actually, it took place in the spring of 1972. I was taken to a time lab in East Hanover, New Jersey, under the direction of Dr. Sterling Colgate. Dr. Colgate was then serving as the president of New Mexico Tech, the New Mexico School of Science and Technology. He had developed a methodology called plasma confinement, where the time traveler stands in a chamber, a clear lucite chamber, and walks into a cloud of plasma and is essentially wormholed to a past location. In fact, that was the only time that I was involved in actual wormholing, where as I was moving through the quantum plenum, I was moving through a series of arching tunnels that were sort of chaotic as I moved onto my destination. The reason that I was invited to go there was essentially as a reward for performing so well in the project. My father and Dr. Colgate asked me whether I wanted to go see Abraham Lincoln give the Gettysburg Address. They thought it was going to be a great thrill for me to do that. But in fact, I was thinking back to my history education in the program and also my conventional schooling and imagining that 1863 portrait of Abraham Lincoln by Alexander Gardner, where he looks basically like a chimpanzee in a black suit. And I was terrified by the notion of seeing Abraham Lincoln as he might appear during his life. It was sort of a Boo Radley moment in my childhood to even contemplate. So I actually begged off, and Dr. Colgate said, well, Ray, to my father, well, Ray, let's come back in 2 weeks and ask Andy whether he wants to go. So my dad drove me up again, up Ridgedale Avenue, up to the time lab in East Hanover, and they asked me the same question. And really, to please my dad, I said, sure, I'd like to go and go see the Gettysburg Address. So a woman named Valerie, I remember her first name, dressed me as a Union bugle boy, and I was invited to enter the plasma confinement chamber. Actually, before that, my dad took a pen or pencil rather, and he had a kind of a mimeograph of an 1863 map of Gettysburg. And he showed me that there was a north-south arterial through the heart of Gettysburg that in the northwest branched off on another road. and they were going to put me down via plasma confinement right on the side of that road so that I could ask a passerby which way Gettysburg was and then walk straight into town, into the very sort of minimal downtown that then existed, where Lincoln was going to be giving the Gettysburg Address on a dais about 3 feet off the ground, right in front of the cemetery there. So I walked inside the chamber. I walked into the cloud of plasma under confinement, and I had this hellacious journey to Gettysburg where actually my hat was ripped off, both of my shoes, and one of my socks. And I popped into view next to that road northwest of Gettysburg. I could smell ozone. I was feverish. I was then reacting to the rather brisk autumn air, and I realized I only had one sock on. So my training took over, and I sat down, and I pulled off the other sock and threw it into the bushes, because I figured if I'm going to be walking into Gettysburg barefoot, I should be entirely barefoot. So I then began walking without a hat. I didn't have a jacket. I was just dressed in the jersey of a Union bugle boy. No shoes. I met a gaunt teenage soldier, a Union soldier, walking along the side of the road, and I yelled to him, as my father had instructed me, "Hey, friend, which way Gettysburg?" And this individual stopped and squared his shoulders in the direction I was going and pointed that way. You're going in the right direction. So I spent about, I would say, 20 minutes walking past farmhouses and really utterly shivering in the cold autumn air. And I got into downtown Gettysburg, and I thought, I better find some warmer clothing here, because I'm not going to be able to stand seeing Abraham Lincoln give the Gettysburg Address.
And how long are you supposed to be there?
I beg your pardon?
How long are you supposed to be there before they yank you back?
I was expecting to be there only long enough to see the Gettysburg Address. And the paradox of this, it really shows how advanced their time travel technologies were by this time. We're talking 1972. In some of these probes, certainly the chronovisor probes, I'm not certain about plasma confinement, they were actually able to see us where we were located in the quantum hologram. So I was anticipating being there for several hours, but really just long enough to see the Gettysburg Address. So I walked down to downtown Gettysburg, and I went up on some of the wooden sidewalks that were in front of the downtown Gettysburg the storefront.
So, Andy, there you are. You're little, you're shoeless, you're almost coatless, you're freezing, and you're walking into Gettysburg to see President Lincoln's address. What happens?
Well, I walked into downtown Gettysburg, which really didn't even resemble a downtown area. It was just really a cluster of buildings that looked like housing, with some of them with multiple stores occupying some of them. And I walked up onto the wooden sidewalk of one of them and looked into what we would call a millinery shop, which during the Civil War contained things like men's shoes and hats and cravats and walking sticks and so forth, gloves. And as I was doing so, an elderly man gambled on up to the wooden sidewalk. He was about 70 years old, and he was limping severely on one of his legs. And he began yelling at me, boy, what are you doing out here in the cold like this? You're going to catch your grip," which I take in the Civil War era must have meant catch a cold or a flu. And I've identified that man from historical photographs as a Gettysburg cobbler named John Lawrence Burns. John Burns was a citizen of Gettysburg. In fact, he was one of the first volunteers to the War of 1812 as a child. And when the Battle of Gettysburg swept through and past Gettysburg in July of 1863, he volunteered as a Union sharpshooter, was wounded in the hip, and was surrendered by Confederate forces under a flag of surrender back to the Union forces, and was discharged from the battlefield. And so when I identified this man from historical photographs and realized it was the man who then took me inside the millinery shop to outfit me with a jacket and shoes because he was concerned about my well-being, I really found three things that were quite startling historical correspondences. One, of course, was his appearance. The other was his injury. I mean, before I even knew and had identified him as John Burns, I was describing how this 70-year-old man was limping severely as he walked up onto the wooden sidewalk. Mm-hmm. And then the other linkage that quite serendipitously identified without initially knowing who he was his profession. He was a Gettysburg cobbler. So he took me in the shop, and we went to the back of the main floor of the store. It just was basically had a kind of a storage room behind that one-room floor space. And there was a shelf with multiple shelves that had used shoes on them. They weren't military boots. They were civilian shoes. And he took a pair of brown men's street shoes that must have been about a size 14. And he had me step into them, and he began actually shoving packing paper into the front of the shoes and was giving me this pair of secondhand shoes. He then took me into the storage room behind the shop and rummaged through a stack of about 40 men's jackets, most of them military issue, and outfitted me with a navy blue Union winter parka, which fit perfectly. And then as he was sort of smiling at me, he put a cap on my head. He then said, "Young man, I have to go. The President of the United States is arriving here today, and I have to see him." So he actually walked out of the shop, limping severely, ahead of me. And I followed him over to the dais where Lincoln was going to be soon arriving, walking along like a young boy, in his father's Sunday slippers. Like I could hardly even walk in these grossly oversized men's shoes. Now, over at the dais, which at that point only had maybe 10 or 15 people had already gathered, there was an open dais with nothing on top of it. It was just a big wooden area about, let's say, maybe 15 or 20 feet deep and maybe 40 feet across, with patriotic red, white, and blue bunting around it, but no parapet or ceiling of any kind, or pillars or anything. It was just a flat expanse of wood. And I went to the front of the dais because I've been told that I was going to be given the opportunity to see Lincoln give the Gettysburg Address, and I was trying to overcome my fear of looking at him when he arrived. And I looked to my left, and there was my father, dressed as a Pennsylvania farmer.
So he went back there, too?
Well, he went back there, but he had left East Hanover on a previous day, but had been sent to the same day in history, November 19th of 1863. And I looked to my left, and there was my father, dressed as a Pennsylvania farmer.
So he went back there, too?
Well, he went back there, but he had left East Hanover on a previous day, but had been sent to the same day in history, November 19th of 1863.
Was he looking for you?
At that time, no. He had been sent there earlier, so he couldn't have been briefed on my later arrival to the same day. And I looked over at him and said, "Dad, what are you doing here?" And he said, "I'm not your father, son. You must be mistaken."
He
I thought,
played it that close to his
Well, see, his training was kicking, and he was thinking, boy, if Andy's here, and he looks several years older than he does back at the house back in 1967 or whenever he had been sent, I better act like I'm not even his father. So my dad, made sure that he didn't alert any of the people around him that, in fact, his son was there as well, recognizing him as being there, which is certainly a strange event. I was very disconcerted about this because here I'm in 1863 in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, being aware of the momentous event that is about to occur with President Lincoln giving his famous address there. And I thought, this is very disconcerting. So I walked away from my dad over to the left side of the dais. And there were two ladies, young ladies, dressed in their Sunday best, kind of gossiping at me behind their fans. They were sort of saying, "Well, look at this little carpetbagger. Look at the Union jacket he has on. Look at those men's shoes." They must have thought I was a carpetbagger who had collected my clothing off of the battlefield, because they couldn't have comprehended that I would have been given back by Mr. Burns back.
And maybe an orphan or something.
Right, an orphan, maybe a deserter from a Union regiment. But they were certainly paying attention to me. And in my training, I had been coached to always avoid scrutiny, because scrutiny might result in becoming captive. And if we were captured, they might have difficulty extracting us from a location in the past or future. So again, my training kicked in, and I moved to another location more again to the center of the dais, the left corner of the dais. And there were two Union officers. I was questioned by them about where my regiment was and what my regiment was and where I was bivouacked. And I remember saying, "What's bivouac, sir?" And they laughed hysterically. So here was more scrutiny that I realized I should avoid. So I thought, this is really strange. My dad's here. Some of the civilians of Gettysburg are noticing me. Now 2 Union officers, who must be guards for President Lincoln, have noticed my presence, and they're wondering why this Union bugle boy is there without his regiment, dressed sort of haphazardly at that. So I decided, my training kicked in, and even though at that point I really sort of wanted to see Abraham Lincoln give the Gettysburg Address, I decided to walk about 200 paces on a diagonal away from the dais. And because I was, walking along in these grossly oversized shoes, sort of like shuffling along, I wanted to conceal the size of the shoes so I wouldn't attract any more notice. So I held my left foot forward and my right foot to the side, and I looked in the opposite direction from the Wills Hotel where Lincoln would soon be arriving. And it was in that strange posture, dressed in the clothing that John Lawrence Burns gave me, wearing grossly oversized men's shoes, as a time traveler from 1972 in DARPA's Project Pegasus, that I was photographed in the photograph that until last year was the sole surviving photograph to show President Lincoln at Gettysburg on the day that he gave the address there. That's known as the Josephine Cobb image of Lincoln at Gettysburg.
Back to the Future, Doctor Who, Legends of Tomorrow, and The Flash are some of Hollywood's greatest creative movies and shows that explore the mysteries and consequences of traveling through time. Many people don't understand the ramifications of time traveling. If someone was to change anything in the timeline, it would change everything as we know it, and nobody would even notice. Our memory, our minds would instantly change to adjust for the change made in history. But what if the mind could actually hold on to bits and pieces of the old timeline? What if our subconscious minds could remember how things used to be? When we return, we will look at some possible changes made to our timeline. This is the Mandela Effect. The Mandela Effect may have had an impact on your life, and you may have never realized. But what are some things that make people believe in the Mandela Effect? What has actually changed in our timeline? The Mandela Effect is actually backed up with a piece of evidence from a book called English Alive. In this book, the author says that Nelson Mandela died on July 23rd of 1991. Unless you're writing a piece of fiction, you're not allowed to misquote things like this, which makes this book eerie proof that Nelson Mandela did indeed die in an alternate timeline. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. Researching the Mandela Effect, I discovered changes to the timeline that I found to be downright spooky to me. For example, I have always known the Berenstain Bears as the Berenstain Bears, but now it would seem that they were never called the Berenstain Bears. They were always known as the Berenstain Bears. Or were they? Almost everybody I have asked remembers them as the Berenstain Bears. What makes this creepy though is there was a Reddit user who found an old Berenstain Bears tape in his garage. He posted this picture, and on the front of the tape it says Berenstain Bears, but on the side of the tape it actually says the Berenstain Bears. People have tested the authenticity of this photograph, and it has been determined it is real. There was even an old TV commercial for the TV show that called them the Berenstain Bears. Is this the result of the Mandela Effect?
Tonight is Berenstain Bear Jump Rope Derby. Since the bear made it into the front, thanks to our tribe.
What about this show? Many people, including myself, always remember the show as Sex in the City, but the whole time it was truly called Sex and the City.
Now, another very popular Mandela Effect is Sex in the City. So everybody that I know remembers the show being called Sex in the City. And then you realize, no, it's been Sex and the City the whole time. And then recently, this came out. So here's a clip from some award shows back in the day where they called it Sex in the City. Check it out.
Nominees for Outstanding Supporting Actress in a Comedy Series are
Kim Cattrall, Sex in the City. Kristen Davis, Sex in the City. Cynthia Nixon, Sex in the City, of course.
I know, fucking crazy, but that's not the only thing. Someone on YouTube who goes by the name of The Whole World's Watching posted this video. He has a fan package of Sex in the City that has like perfume and cups and stuff, and they all say Sex in the City. Check it out.
Alright, you want proof of the Mandela Effect? Sex in the City. No question, what it used to be, hard fucking evidence.
Hey guys, welcome back. Sorry, this is going to be a very short video, but I figured I'd do the short video. It's louder. Do the short video for tonight so you guys at least have something, because I tweeted that I wouldn't be putting up a video tonight and you guys begged me for it, so alright. But it's on my new favorite perfume, literally. So my mother-in-law gave me this gift set and I just had to do a small little review on it. It's Sex in the City's Lust. Ugh, big ass box. So basically what it comes with is a 20 milliliter spray bottle perfume, a 100 milliliter perfume bottle, the body lotion, and the shower gel. Now I used the shower gel all weekend and the lotion, and I've been carrying this little one with me all day. Literally, since I've gotten it, this has just been the ultimate thing. But I had to search it up and basically get little things. You can find this set for 20 bucks online. It's kind of a florally scent. And usually I'm not a floral scent person, but I figured, you know, like this was given to me, I was like, I would at least try it. But then I ended up falling in love with it.
People even point to major movie scenes being changed. For example, everybody remembers this line from Snow White.
Magic mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all? Yeah.
Wait, what did she say? Did she say magic mirror on the wall? Why do so many people remember it as mirror, mirror on the wall? Even Disney books of Snow White say mirror, mirror. The famous rapper Snoop Dogg has a song called Lottie Dottie where he even quotes it as mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the top dog of them all. Forrest Gump's most famous line even changed. People remember Forrest Gump saying life is like a box of chocolates, but in the movie he actually says Mama always said life was like a box of chocolates. And the one that really gets me is from Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back. I have always been a huge Star Wars fan, so why do I remember Darth Vader saying, Luke, I am your father, but in the movie he actually says, no, I am your father. It would seem that even James Earl Jones, the voice of Vader, even remembers it as Luke, I am your father.
When I first saw the dialogue that said, Luke, I am your father, I said to myself, he's lying. I wonder how they're going to play that lie out.
UFOs, time travel, the Mandela Effect. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of Mandela effects being discovered every day. You can find a bunch of videos about the Mandela Effect on YouTube. But what are your thoughts? Is the Mandela Effect real, or is the concept demonic? Have you discovered any Mandela effects in your life? Sound off in the comment section and let me know what you think. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more. This has been Devin with Up TV, and this is the Mandela Effect. Thank you for watching Up TV. If you like this video and would love to see more, check out these great videos here, and don't forget to subscribe to Up TV and Up TV 2 for even more great videos.